Crystal, what's your favorite music city?
Music City, Chicago. House
Oh,
music.
wow.
You literally just said house music, Chicago.
That's a shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you would love music in Chicago. You know what's fun is jazz clubs in Chicago.
House of Blues also.
Oh.
So Joe, what's your favorite music city?
Well, I'm originally from Detroit, but you know what? And Detroit is such a diverse music scene, from Motown to some of the cool rock and roll bands out of Detroit. I remember friends of mine, actually, they were playing pickup basketball like outside of high school on a Saturday. And this old guy shows up in a Silverado truck, and he and he starts playing. He asked if they can play basketball with him. Like, this old guy was schooling us. And then he has to leave. And one guy goes, "You know who that was, don't you?" And my buddy who was playing basketball goes, "No, I have no idea. It was Bob Seger."
Oh, wow.
They were playing basketball with Bob Seger. So fun.
That's way too
Anyway,
cool.
today we are going all around North America with our brand new friends, Joe and Craig, who are waiting backstage, and they're going to take us on a tour of some of the cool music scenes around North America.
And then let's be real, most travel gear out there is just plain awful. So that's why we share our gear of the day at the end of each episode. So these are pieces we've actually used ourselves, or they come recommended from fellow adventurers. So it's not some random thing you saw in a Facebook ad. It's something that we've actually tried. So if you want tried and true gear that saves you money, makes your trip smoother, and helps you adventure smarter, check out our page at stackingadventures.com/gear of the day, or GOTD, and you'll be supporting our show, and you'll be setting yourself up with something that's Crystal Joe-alicious. I made up that word. So you're welcome.
There's a phrase you made up also. You didn't really make it up, but there's a phrase that you use at the beginning of every show, and it's...
Let's get this show on the road.
Right.
Ready for adventure? From vacation to staycation, and from the mountains to the beach. This is the Stacking Adventures podcast.
Welcome back to the Stacking Adventures podcast, where we head around the world with our adventure community, stack memories that we'll remember forever. Every adventure has a story, and we want to hear yours. Today, we're going to hear the story of two journalists who have a rough job, Crystal. They travel around North America listening to music. That's tough.
That would be fun. And music brings people together, and music, brings memories. So you think of exactly what you were doing a lot of times the first time you've heard a song. So I'm looking forward to hearing more stories about music.
You do. It's better than a picture, isn't it? Just the memory of, I hear this song and I remember where I was.
Exactly. It takes you back instantly.
So she's Crystal Hammond.
And I'm Joe. You're Joe Saul-Sehy.
And I am Joe Saul-Sehy. And why don't we meet our guest? Joining us from the frozen tundra of Ontario is Craig Jones. And Joe, it's funny. I want to pronounce your last name Matyas. Is it Matyas?
It's Matyas.
Matyas. And I bet does everybody get it wrong like Saul-Sehy?
Yes.
Yes.
You didn't mangle it too badly, so don't worry.
Matyas.
We're in the same club, Joe. So Joe, sticking with you for a second, how rough is it traveling the United States and Canada doing, quote, research while you're listening to music all over the world?
It's a brutal job. It's a brutal job. And I've been working full time as a travel writer for 24 years now. And prior to launching these books, researching the books together with Craig, I had an even harder job in that I was flying all over the world. And I was on the road for newspapers and magazines for about 140 days a year. So I was all over the place all the time. And then finally I came home and I said to Craig,
Joe, that actually is rough, isn't it? Joe, that actually is rough. When you're on the road that much.
It is tough.
That kind of sucks.
Tough. Yeah. It has its definite upsides. And I was on the road a lot. And so I came home and I finally said to Craig, we should try and do something together, because he's quite a skilled writer as well as a musician. And a wonderful researcher. So we said, well, why don't we do some travel music destinations? And we bought a really old camper van. That was our first camper van. And we hit the road for a couple of months to research the roots of American music in the Southeast, generally, in the Southeastern US. And we started writing articles for newspapers and magazines, and it caught the eye of a publisher, great publisher, Rowman and Littlefield. And they came to us and said, we'd like to do a book. If you do a book on one of these genres, what would you choose? So we started with the blues, and we wrote a book called Chasing the Blues. It was published in 2021, and it's won 2 different awards, one American, one Canadian. And it's just moved on from there. They asked for a second book, and we said, so many amazing museums, all genres, let's go with that. And they jumped on board. So it's been a real great ride. I don't travel much internationally anymore. I've kind of handed that off to the generation coming up behind me, and we do North America quite extensively.
Oh, that's
Craig, your
cool.
roots are in music?
Well, I'm a lifer musician, but I did a PhD in international relations and history and so forth. So I have a great deal of experience writing, and being a lifer musician, I've picked up a lot of stuff along the way.
You start off this project, and I love the first words in your book, and it's this phrase, even if, right? Why is even if this phrase we should be asking ourselves?
Well, I have to tell you, the phrase even if really came to me because one spot that really blew us away and was totally unexpected was Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is really a hotbed of music history. It has the Woody Guthrie Center there, but right next door is the amazing Bob Dylan Center. And I'm not necessarily a huge Bob Dylan fan. And I went into there, and it was one of the best museums I've ever seen. I came away totally humbled by how was I going to write this thing to give it the justice that it really deserved. It was an amazing museum. So even if you aren't a Bob Dylan fan, this is a museum that's going to tell you a lot about the history and politics of the time and where he got his inspiration from and the process of songwriting and production and how it all cross-pollinates and intersects with other styles. So we found one even if moment like that after another.
I found this in my own life just last week. Cheryl and I were on our way to West Virginia just to visit the national park and go hiking, but we had an extra day. So we stopped at this theme park called Dollywood.
Yes.
And well, how can you not like Dolly Parton? I've just never considered myself to be a fan, but I left the museum inside Dollywood, which was amazing about Dolly Parton. I think I'm a huge fan now.
Exactly.
Just after asking Joe your phrase, even if I'm not a Dolly fan, why don't I go in and take a look at the museum? And I walked out with a whole different view of this woman and how hard she had to work to get any sort of success up front.
It expands your horizons dramatically just to get over that even if hump and say, I'm not necessarily interested in Martin guitars, but you come out of the Martin Guitar Factory in Nazareth, Pennsylvania going, oh my God, I had no idea there was such craftsmanship, what the history was. And the museums we've seen have been from mom and pop shops to Smithsonian affiliate museums, like just amazing from one to the other to see the love and the care and the professionalism put into them.
Well, here's what we're going to do, adventurers. We're going to ask Joe and Craig because this amazing book has so many places to visit, and wherever you're going, if you have this as a guide, you can just peel off the area you're already heading to and find a wonderful museum. But we're going to ask you for maybe some quirky stuff or iconic stuff. We're going to take you through maybe one or two in each region. How does that sound?
Great.
So Crystal, let's start where Craig and Joe start, maybe in the Northeast.
The Northeast, you say that's where folk found its voice. So I wanted to know, like, if someone wanted to feel the Northeast, like the folk roots, not just read about them, you want to feel them. So what town or venue should they, like, definitely you can't miss?
Floyd.
Really?
Floyd, Virginia.
Oh, yeah. Real authentic. Wonderful people. On Friday nights, they all gather in the town, and this spontaneous music breaks out everywhere. It's just a beautiful experience to walk through the town and listen to various people playing various instruments at various levels of skill.
The Floyd is in the southwest corner of Virginia, just off the Blue Ridge Parkway and along famous Crooked Road Music Trail, which really celebrates the roots of that kind of music. And every Friday night, they have the Floyd Country Store Friday Night Jamboree. And it starts outside on the main street of Floyd, which is not a large place. There's little seating areas along the main street, and musicians come and gather and sit together and play. People bring out large wooden squares of wood, put them on the ground, and flatfoot dance right in front of the musicians. So you're getting a whole show before you even go inside for the show.
I didn't know about that because it sounds similar to like Porch Fest. So this Crooked Road musical trail, how far is it?
I think it starts from around Charlottesville and goes all the way down to Bristol.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And Bristol is right on the border of Tennessee and Virginia. The main street divides it. So you have to be really careful if you have a radar detector in your car. If you're going one way, it's legal. If you're going the other way on the main street, it's not legal. So Bristol's a lovely musical city as well. It's home to the birthplace of Country Music Museum, which is dedicated to the 1927 Big Bang of country music. It's got a whole history behind it, bringing in the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers and launching country music into people's homes in electronic ways that they never would have been able to hear before. Before that, if you wanted to hear music, you pretty well had to be in the same room, hear it live. And that Big Bang changed everything. And country and folk, everything is related. That's the other thing that we really learned. Craig might want to speak about.
Entangled, how one genre of music infuses itself into another. Humans are great innovators, but also we're very good at copying and innovating and, perfecting and, bringing our own sound and style to it. And that's the nature of how this music influenced one genre to another.
It strikes me, that was kind of the genius of Elvis Presley, right? Was bringing a lot of that blues influence into music for a whole new audience, Craig.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that Elvis's big love was actually gospel. He wanted to be part of a gospel quartet. That was his goal. And he certainly veered away from that, you could say.
But he was also marinated in Black culture because he was surrounded. He's a sharecropper's son. He was surrounded by Black culture, and so he picked up a lot of that as well. And, you can hear it in his styling. And really, Elvis sanitized Black music for a white audience, and that's a huge contribution to popular culture.
And crossover.
I want to stay. I'm kind of moving into our next area, the Southeast, by asking you Elvis questions, but let's stay in the Northeast for just a second longer, because I'm wondering that, when you go to some of these big cities in the Northeast, New York City or to Boston, for example, are there places in those cities that are kind of overlooked by the average tourist that if you're a music fan, maybe you need to stop in and pay a visit to?
Well, I would say the Louis Armstrong Museum, anything to do with Louis Armstrong, because he's such a huge influence on jazz. If you ask me, is there a city in North America that has the biggest impact on music? Because I'm kind of a jazz fan these days. As I get older, I migrate more and more toward jazz. New York City, right? So I would say the Louis Armstrong Museum would be at the top of my list in New York.
Yeah, and our book focuses on museums and historic sites, and it doesn't really include, the smaller places that have a rich history or are rich in music now, have great clubs, for example, because we're focusing on the museums.
Yeah, well, you hit it a nail on the head, Floyd. I mean, kicking off with a place that I didn't even know existed on the map before your book.
Floyd is great. Go on a Friday night.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Just a random Friday, and people are out there playing music.
Friday.
Yeah,
Every Friday.
How great is that? Well, let's go to the Southeast, guys. It was funny looking at the Southeast. Of course, we're live on YouTube for people that are listening later, and so many people are saying, of course, New Orleans
Of
course.
is one of their favorite places. Nashville, another obvious favorite. I was surprised to see, I know there's a rich musical history in Alabama, but I didn't realize just how much in Alabama. Like Alabama, really, man, if you want to see good music stuff, it's all over Alabama.
Yeah.
Home of Hank Williams in Montgomery in the southeast part of the state. And then, of course, the northwest corner that people who love music may really know this, but it's often overlooked, is the whole Muscle Shoals area. And that Muscle Shoals is super rich. It's made up of 4 small towns together that create this Muscle Shoals region. And it's, it's well known for the Swampers, the studio band at Muscle Shoals Sound Studio. We were lucky enough to sit down with David Hood, the bass players for the Swampers, and he was just loved talking about the history of the area and the history of the music.
Very generous guy. But, really, anywhere you had a plantation economy in the 17th, 18th century, you had a burst of creative music, some of it born from extraordinary suffering, of course, right? And hardship. But that's the origin of that culture, and that's the music that infused itself into every other style of music that came over from the old world.
And that's why the Southeast is really the area that dominates and is really rich. You've got the influence of the African-American culture and the tragic history and times of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And that created the blues, and the blues infused almost everything. It crossed into everything.
Craig, it's funny. As you said, as you get older, you get more into jazz. I get older, I get more into blues. I had very little appreciation for the blues, I think, until I moved to Texarkana, and then now you're surrounded. We always drive through Memphis on our way back and forth to the Midwest. And then of course you're close enough to New Orleans, and you get both jazz and blues and heck, gospel. I mean, you get everything.
New Orleans, fabulous.
It's just such a great spot. Is there a place in the Southeast though that we should really shine a light where people might not expect to find something?
Indianola, Mississippi.
Huh.
Where the B.B. King Museum and Delta Cultural Center is.
Oh.
It's kind of off the beaten track, but it is a spectacular exhibit. It's really curated to a fairly well. And the guy who runs it is Robert Terrell, is just a sweetheart of a guy, and he's happy to show you around. And B.B. King is buried there. And King had foresight enough to plan for his afterlife, as it were, and to stack the exhibit with thousands of his personal effects, his little home studio, his touring bus, his guitars. It's I think of it as a 4-hour museum, and it's really beautifully done. So I would say that would be my first call, is Indianola.
Yeah, Indianola is the largest town close to the dirt road intersection where he was actually born, and the museum itself is part of the original cotton gin that he worked at.
Wow.
as a teenager. And I guess one day he crashed the tractor and took off and left for Memphis. And then when he made more money, came back and replaced the tractor for the farm. But I would say in general, in a bigger picture, a lot of people skip over Mississippi. And Mississippi is, in addition to Clarksdale, which is a wonderful destination, especially for the blues, but Mississippi is infused with many, many amazing museums dedicated to music and the blues in Clarksdale and all across the state. And a lot of people just skip through it or bypass around it. But we spent weeks and weeks and weeks just in Mississippi. Yeah. And we're always welcomed into people's homes, onto their front porches, played music. Craig got roped into gigs, right, at playing gigs when they were short a bass player just along the way part of the time. We, traveled in our camper van with our dog and often with several instruments along the way. And he played gigs here and there when they needed a player.
Boy, I bet that sucked, Craig. I bet that was horrible.
It's another tough part of the job.
I survived it. While you're in Mississippi, you must go to Tupelo, which is Elvis's birthplace, just to come back to that. Because in my opinion, the site birthplace exhibit is superior to Graceland. Graceland it's glamorous, it's interesting, but Tupelo is much more closer to Elvis's experience.
And Elvis's roots. I don't know if many people know that he was actually a Mississippian and born in Tupelo and lived there until I think he was around 13 or 14, and the family moved to Memphis. But he lived on the wrong side of the tracks, was born in a little 2-room shotgun shack, which they still have there. In 1957, he went back and did a concert in Tupelo, took the money from the concert, purchased all the land around his little home shotgun shack.
Wow.
And donated it to become a museum.
Wow.
And then the family's Pentecostal church, because he was very influenced by the church, was moved a few blocks over, put on the site. The museum was built, but it's quite an amazing place, and where you really learn about the roots of this fellow that later changed music, sitting in Sam Phillips' studio in Sun Studios in Memphis, not so far away.
I can't even hear the word Tupelo without thinking of Elvis. I have friends from Tupelo, so I did know that was Elvis's birthplace. But also, thinking about much more current music, Jason Isbell, the Grammy Award winner, has a great song called Tupelo. So I can't say the word Tupelo; I have to sing it.
And then there's Van Morrison's Tupelo Honey.
Van Morrison's Tupelo Honey, yeah. Yeah,
it's a great location. I mean, Tupelo, Clarksdale, Indianola, Jackson, West Point. There's a lot of places in Mississippi, and they're often overlooked.
And if you want to make contact with a different kind of reality, drive by Parchman Farm, where Elvis's dad was incarcerated for kiting a check.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's one of the darker moments in the American story, but if you want to understand the full scope of things and how the blues came to be such a powerful rendition of the human experience, you got to visit Parchman.
Some of our adventures hanging out with us. Bitcoin Juan says, I was born in Flowood, Mississippi, and family comes from Philadelphia, Mississippi. Get you some Tupelo honey and meet nice people.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the nicest people.
Yeah.
Well, not amongst the nicest. I don't want to put them above everybody else, but we enjoyed our time in Mississippi and would go back in a heartbeat, and tell people all the time that is a great place to go if you want to understand the roots of a lot of American music.
Wow.
I knew that we because we love music so much that we risk running long, but we got to move to the South Central. Crystal, take us there.
Well, the book, like your book, is it's just given us a smidge of what's in each area. Like I've already written down so many places to try that I never knew even existed. So, all right. So South Central, when I think of Texas and Oklahoma, I think of cowboy hats, but there's so much more than just cowboy hats. What I would say, and Texas and Tulsa and Austin are two totally different, but equally
Very
legendary, areas. So what makes each then a must visit?
Well, Tupelo is really an extraordinary place.
Or Tulsa, you mean?
Tulsa.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Tulsa is an extraordinary place. Yeah. I think it's like, it's one of those, like Kingston is the same sort of place. It's a smaller center between larger venues. So it's really easy to book a gig in Tulsa en route to a larger venue, which means that, when you think about routing musicians, you get a night in Tulsa, that makes sense en route to Austin or some other place. So as a result, a lot of great artists have transited through Tulsa, and some have, sort of taken root there, right? I'm thinking of pianist, church studio, Leon Russell. Now, he's born in that area, but he returned there, built a couple of studios actually, and people gravitated to that studio in order to be close to Leon Russell and his sound.
But the Tulsa has a wonderful arts district, the Tulsa Arts District downtown, in historic buildings that's really anchored by the Woody Guthrie Center, which has a 3-story mural dedicated to "This Land Is Your Land" and Woody Guthrie. And he was a very, very influential resident of Oklahoma. And what his museum really shows is how influenced he was by the Dust Bowl. He lived through that era. And there is a wonderful exhibit where you sit on a reconstructed front porch of a home of that era, and you put on the video
virtual reality headset.
And you get an idea of what it would be like to sit and to have the dust storm coming towards you, and you learn the history of it.
Pretty harrowing.
It's pretty harrowing. Then a lot of people from Oklahoma had to leave and go to California to find work. He followed them, and then really was touched by how disenfranchised they were, how difficult it was for them, raised a lot of social justice issues, and that's what he started to write about. And then he really influenced Bob Dylan, who worshipped Woody Guthrie and was really connected to social justice issues, to issues around nuclear power and the proliferation of that. And it's this right next door. Bob Dylan built the Bob Dylan Center, which is amazing, next door to the amazing Woody Guthrie Center. Bob Dylan has actually visited the Woody Guthrie Center when it was built, but he donated much of what's in the Bob Dylan Center, but he's never actually visited his own center.
Oh, interesting.
Which would be very Dylan-esque, I think. Anyhow, Tulsa, there was another in Texas. I mean, we were so in the middle of nowhere, a little town called Brady, Texas. We couldn't even get cell service there. And it is home to the
Country Music Hall of Fame.
Texas Country Music Hall
which
of Fame.
is kind of a mom and pop operation. A young man gets his first job in a radio station, and he starts writing to country music artists, hey, send me a pair of boots, send me a hat, send me something like that.
Obsessed with Loretta Lynn, I have to say.
And 20 years later, he's got more stuff than he knows what to do with, so he sets up a little museum.
Wow.
This is a recurring feature of these smaller mom and pop shops. It's kind of the fusion of, well, in one case, the fusion of what you might politely call an obsessive compulsive syndrome with a lot of money, and a guy who is absolutely fixated on bringing exotic and rare instruments from all over the world to South Carolina, to the point where suddenly he's got 20 transport trucks full of stuff that he has to find a home for.
Wow.
So he purchases a Coca-Cola bottling plant, and he calls in a world-class curator, and he sets up this extraordinary museum with a piano played on by Chopin and a harpsichord played on by Mozart and so forth.
And that's back to the southeast. That's in Segal.
Yeah.
That's the Segal Museum in South Carolina.
What I'm trying to draw attention to is the spectrum of these museums and exhibits runs from the mom and pop, one shop kind of thing, like for Hank Williams in Montgomery, Alabama, at one end of the spectrum, to the Smithsonian institutions at the other end of the spectrum. Just like the range is extraordinary. Even the mom and pop shops, these people pour their heart into it, and they're just beautiful exhibits.
Passion.
Yeah, I don't think some of these small places you're worried about making a lot of money. You're just paying homage to
sometimes some of them are struggling, and some of them rely a lot on volunteers. Yeah. But their hearts are in it.
Yeah. And they don't all last. Some of them go under. Like who's the guy who wrote Trailers for Sailor Rent?
Roger Miller, right?
Yeah, Roger Miller. That one closed. So it's not a sure thing. I mean, obviously the Smithsonian institutions are secure for the moment, but some of the others are just hanging on. But they depend on tourism. So we are happy to promote them and encourage people to visit them.
Yeah, because the small ones are really still worth going to.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a big fan of Roy Orbison, you want to go to Wink, Texas.
Yeah. Or Janis Joplin.
Janis.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing about the importance of this too, because the smaller ones, it's like, how do we find out about the smaller places and the more intimate settings? Because some of us don't want. Exactly. That's why your book is important, because it is.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of us don't want to do the tourist trap places when we go out of town or even in our own backyards. We want to support small businesses.
Yeah. And one of the things that we tried to do is, if we could buttonhole the curator in any particular museum, we would ask them, what else should we be looking for in this immediate area? They would often know, well, just down the road, there's, that sort of thing.
So we would have to reroute where we were going. Every day we would be rerouting the map and going places we never thought we were going to head. And I would have to say it always paid off. We always met wonderful people and found amazing things. And in the book, we tried to highlight some of those things that wouldn't be in a normal guidebook. Like one that jumps out to me is a little historic site in Tryon, North Carolina, where Nina Simone, there's on the main street, the pianist, there's a statue dedicated to her, a beautiful statue of her at her keyboards. And I guess when she was cremated, they took part of the remains, put them in a brass heart, and the heart with the cremated remains is inside the statue.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And I don't think Tryon has more than 500 or 600 people.
Interesting. before we go to the next area, so we got to cover Austin quickly because that's supposed to be the music capital, not of the world, but
It is definitely
of
a
the
music
world.
capital.
Live
It's
music capital.
live music, you
Yeah.
see, and very few museums. So we cover Austin and its historic sites and the museums there. It's it really punches above its weight when it comes to live music venues. That's a whole different book. That'll be the next book.
Okay. Yeah. So if we
Yeah,
had one night, where would we go? Or you can't.
Isn't there more people playing there every night in that one city than any other city? So there's some statistic like that.
I haven't seen that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I can't remember the name of the road now, but there's a specific road, and there are districts there that are
6th Street.
filled.
I think down 6th Street.
Has a reputation for being a little rowdy.
Yeah.
But there are other parts of the city that are, have historic, very historic with deep roots, some of the clubs. But again, it wasn't, we mentioned those, but as far as actual museums go, it didn't have a lot.
But boy,
Those
that's
are
funny.
still to come.
But Brady, Texas, I just looked up in the middle of hill country.
Oh yeah.
You gotta want to go there, Joe, because that's in the middle. That's in the middle of nowhere.
It is really, we had no cell service, but it was worth it.
Huh.
There were Tracy Pitcock has the owner and curator of it has collected these items that if they were at the Country Music Hall of Fame would be in, humidity controlled cases that are bulletproof, and he's got them in. I mean, they're beautifully displayed. The displays are, but it can be as quirky as a brick from Hank Williams' house in his town where he grew up, Mount Olive.
That's funny.
To Nudie. Do you know who Nudie is? He's a tailor to the stars, especially country music stars. Very elaborate stage wear that's often embroidered or embossed with different characters. And he has a collection of nudie suits there, I think, that rival anything at the Country Music Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Quick Janis Joplin trivia. And I already gave you the answer, but it was always my favorite Trivial Pursuit answer to who was voted the ugliest man on campus at the University of Texas in 1963, I think. And the answer was Janis Joplin. So,
oh dear. Poor Janis.
Poor Janis. Yeah. Let's move on to the Midwest, which, I got to start out Motown, which was where most of my career was spent. So I am going next September with a group of people from Texarkana. And one of them is a huge musician, plays in a band, loves whenever we buy him a gift, it's always music related, which I think he's going to see your book fairly soon from us. But the other people we're traveling with, not music fans. And it's funny, doing as much of my career in Detroit and being a music fan as I have been, I've never visited this museum, the Motown Museum. So for non-music fans, is it worth a stop at the Motown Museum?
Well, the Motown Museum is just undergoing a massive expansion. So it was great. We saw it pre-expansion and it was fantastic. So I would think post-expansion it's going to be even more worthwhile. But Craig has some really good insights about how that museum, where it actually is located and why that's important, and some of the history behind it that makes it worth going there.
What's a non-music fan?
Who is that person?
Hilarious.
Why do you associate with such people?
I got to lose them, Craig.
Well, people of a certain generation, like Joe and I are born in 56 and 57, and you might be in that demographic as well. Motown was a massive influence on popular music. Is there anybody that can't sing, My Girl,
right?
Or half a dozen other Motown songs? Just call them up from memory. They were so catchy. They were so well put together. They were so well performed. And the Motown Museum really takes you into that culture and that whole business enterprise. And it's again, it's a beautiful exhibit. I'm really looking forward to returning because I'd love to see the renovation. But, and the other thing I have to say is before you go to Motown, you really must screen the documentary Standing in the Shadows of Motown. Are you familiar with that?
No, not at all.
Standing in the Shadows of Motown. You know, the title is taken from Standing in the Shadows
Yeah,
of
of
Love,
love.
right? So this guy has done a deep dive into the studio musicians who made the Motown sound, centering around the bass player, James Jamerson. And it is a beautiful testimony to the power of music and personalities and how these things come together in this, lightning in a bottle moment. It was more than a moment. It went on for several years, but really worth your time. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't be fascinated to stare into that snake pit, so called because of the microphone cables hanging from the ceiling, and relive some of those tunes. They're forever tunes. I put Motown up there with the Beatles.
Wow. Coming from him, that's quite something, because he worships the Beatles. Motown is also, like many other places like Muscle Shoals, a great introduction to the concept of studio musicians, which non-musicians, non-musical people don't really understand or know about. I certainly didn't. And that's that we assumed that the band that is known for the hit played all the music on the back of it as well. But even in somewhere like California, the Beach Boys they would go into the studio, they would do the vocals, but the studio band that belonged to that studio, the Wrecking Crew, they did the musical, the guitar, all the musical parts of the arrangement.
Yeah.
And the same as in Motown, the studio band was known as the Funk Brothers. And James Jamerson was the bass player there, and they play all the music behind these. And a lot of these guys were jazz musicians, blues musicians, and they would come into the studio at 1 a.m. after their gigs, sometimes not in the best shape. And and
they would play, they play on these tracks till 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then they go home, right? And these were the cream of the crop of the Detroit area bar musicians, basically. But they were just superb musicians. Some of them extremely well trained, some of them, less well trained. But they just had the quality. They had that groove, And that was the story of the Motown. So I highly recommend Standing in the Shadows of Motown, and from the California side, The Wrecking Crew.
The Wrecking Crew,
documentary on the musicians who played behind the Beach Boys, Frank Sinatra, Sonny and Cher, the Monkees, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on.
And another documentary is called Muscle Shoals, and it's about the studio musicians at Muscle Shoals Sound Studio, as well as Fame recording studios, both in the Muscle Shoals area. But going back to Motown in Detroit, there's a story about. You should probably tell it.
In the documentary, they talk about this particular night where Jamerson showed up at the studio and he was not in his best condition. He was a drinker, and he was too drunk, frankly, to sit on a stool and play this part for a song called Bernadette. So they lay him down on the floor and put the bass on him, and he played the part. And if you listen to the isolated track of Bernadette, it is so funky and so out there, and it just speaks to how incredibly talented this guy was, that he could play these parts even when he was not in his best condition.
I love that song. And he's laying on the floor.
Yeah.
Lying on the floor.
Well, and on online, you can find on YouTube, you can find the isolated bass track for just the bass for Bernadette, and it's out of this world.
That's wild. I need to go briefly to, while we're in the Midwest, I think we got to talk about the Twin Cities. We got to talk about Minneapolis, don't we?
It's great sound. Great sound from that part of the world. Yeah. A lot of these northern cities were the beneficiaries of Black people moving from the Deep South after the 1927 flood, which was the largest natural disaster in American history until Katrina, when the Mississippi overflowed. A lot of people migrated out of that part of the world into the cities, Kansas City, New York. A lot of people went to New York. A lot of people went to Detroit, Chicago. Some people went west. Minneapolis was one of the cities that benefited, and they took their culture and they took their music with them, and that fused with the local sensibilities that pre-existed, and that's what gave rise to that sound, that white soul sound.
Museum-wise, is there something in Minneapolis we should see?
Prince.
Oh yeah, Prince.
Of course.
Prince, an extraordinary talent. I mean, he comes along considerably later, but he soaks up all this culture. He reflects that sound. He's again, tragically cut down way too early in his life, but a major contributor, major artist. And if only because he played everything himself,
right?
His own recordings.
That too.
That's that's amazing. And there's so many songs that Prince wrote that people have no idea that Prince wrote the song. I think Manic Monday.
Manic Monday by the Bangles.
Oh, yeah.
was Prince. Like, yeah. Crystal, let's go west.
All right. So let's see. We got It's Music's Lab. So if we wanted to do a trip around building and like music laboratory, where would we start? Is it LA? Is it Seattle? Is it San Fran?
Well, what do you like? I think I would start with that question first. I think there's quite a we didn't make it there, but quite a spectacular museum in Seattle devoted to grunge. But like grunge comes on the scene later, so it doesn't really have it hasn't really developed culture around museum construction yet. But I would say the grunge museum. I can't remember what it's called at the moment.
I've been to this museum, Craig. I think it's the Pop Art Museum, and there's this whole section on grunge.
Okay,
which is really cool. There's a neat by the way letter from Nirvana that they had for their fans, which it was, "Thank you for coming to see us in," and there's a line, and they would just fill it in with the name
every
of
time.
the city. Good. Whatever anybody wrote to them, "We are so happy you're a fan of," whichever part of the thing Nirvana they liked, and they fill that in, and then they signed at the bottom and shoved it in the mail. It was pretty funny.
That is funny.
This is the museum where you can see fragments of Kurt Cobain's guitar
yes.
from a particular smashing on a particular occasion, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I've actually been to that one, and what a fascinating place. Really fun way to spend a afternoon.
So you've got, some musical hotspots. San Francisco, Los Angeles, the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles was fascinating.
Grammy.
But there aren't a lot of core museums there. There's a rich musical history and wonderful places to listen to music as well in the West. I mean, you can't miss the Musical Instrument Museum in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Which is massive and has instruments from all over the world. It's not just North America. And the history of those instruments and how they were developed, the history of how gourds were brought by enslaved African Americans from West Africa and eventually were the basis of the banjo, for example. They have a recreated workshop of showing how Martin guitars were originally built by C.F. Martin back in the 1800s.
And then go north to Vermilion, South Dakota, of all places, which has another unbelievable collection of ancient and instruments from all over the world set up in a university building, 3 stories, a world-class museum, world-class curated.
Smithsonian Museum has everything from ancient violins to a harmonica that Stevie Wonder played, to the trumpet that was used in Sgt. Pepper's, to guitars from everyone you can imagine, as well as just samples of all these kinds of instruments. When you come into town, there's a bulletin billboard that says
Les Paul, more Stradivarius.
And it's, who would have ever thought tucked into this little corner of South Dakota is really a world-class Smithsonian affiliate museum. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
I definitely wouldn't have thought that.
I was so surprised even when I went to the Dakotas just how much I loved it. It was just, the
Dakotas are beautiful. Yeah. The landscape is amazing.
You also talk about the Capitol. Did you tour the Capitol Records Tower?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's go further north. Let's go to Canada. And again, rich history. Some of my favorite bands, my favorite singer-songwriter, Kathleen Edwards from there. I love me some Blue Rodeo. But looking at your book, it looks like we can, when it comes to museums, we can by and large say 2 words, Nova Scotia, and get a rich museum history, rich museum experience if we just go to Nova Scotia.
Well, the Maritimes, you've got Stompin' Tom in Prince Edward Island. And then, of course, Anne Murray is from Nova Scotia, and Hank Snow, big, rich connection to Nashville there. So really, in Canada, I mean, the reality is we have about 150 museums in the U.S. and about 6 in Canada. And it's really Calgary is the other hot spot. And that does not take away from the talent that's here in Canada. It's just that our book focuses on museums.
Yeah.
So we have rich music here. I mean, we're in the town with the Tragically Hip, are based. They all grew up here and played here and got their start here. And
it's a numbers thing. There's just many, many, many more exhibits and museums in the U.S. than there are in Canada.
And they're concentrated mainly in the Southeast. That's just the reality of the history and the way the music moved. Canada, Studio Bell in Calgary is an amazing 5-floor museum or facility that houses 4 different museums: the Canadian Music Hall of Fame, the French one, the Canadian Songwriters Music Hall of Fame, and the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame. And it's designed to be open flowing so that it recreates the feeling of being at a music festival.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
And it has everything from instruments to stageware to history of people like Gordon Lightfoot, Stan Rogers, Blue Rodeo, Anne Murray, David Foster,
the Guess Who,
on and on and on. And so it's a wonderful stop, but it's very concentrated. What may have been 5 different museums spread out over the country are now all under the one facility. And in the Maritimes, you've got you've got that maritime culture and welcome, the Celtic Music Interpretive Center in Cape Breton. But it's really, the maritime music is really heavily influenced by Celtic and by country and by folk.
Let's chat for a second, Crystal, about our gear of the day. You mentioned it at the beginning, and we didn't have a road trip pit stop because we wanted to have more time to talk about all these beautiful places around North America. But what's our road trip pit stop all about?
All right. So we have usually, like we said, it's usually in the halfway, we give people a chance to stretch, but our pit stop is always a hint.
We didn't have time to stretch.
Right,
we were too busy dancing.
We were too busy dancing and talking, and we still didn't even cover, I want to say, a third of what's in the book. But it's our gear of the day. So you can see past gear of the day at our page, stackingadventures.com/GOTD. So our hint, well, do you have the hint today, Joe, of our gear of the day?
I do have a hint.
So
our hint is a guide that you can take with you while you're on a road trip somewhere in North America that might point to different wonderful musical places. And I know this is an obscure hint.
Right.
And there's no way that people will ever get what this hint might lead to.
Because you don't want to leave home without it, especially if you're music. Even if you're not even a music lover,
even for
history lovers.
Do those people actually exist? And if they do, why would you hang out with
the thing is, the book is not just a guide to music museums and historic sites. The whole first section of it is a background to all the different genres of music, how they arose, what they're rooted in, how they cross-pollinated with other styles of music and birthed new things like bluegrass or wherever. So everything, Cajun, Zydeco, jazz, blues, folk, country, it's all covered in there.
Well, and
you can sit at home. You don't even have to be out on the road looking for museums.
You will feel it. You feel it. You are on a journey during the book while you're reading.
Oh, you 100% are. And the pictures are wonderful. And also, by the way, the music trails that you cover at the end, and also all the wonderful festivals around North America where you can just pop in and see different music, or heck, don't even wait for a festival. It sounds like just go to Floyd.
So there you go.
Floyd is a must stop.
That's all you do.
And you'll meet the most wonderful people at all of these spots. I have to say that. We were really, really welcomed everywhere.
I think we gave it away, Crystal. The book is The Music Lover's Guide to North America, written by these two beautiful people hanging out with us, Joe and Craig, and it's museums, historical sites, and other points of interest. And I think, guys, it's available everywhere, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's Bloomsbury Publishing. Their imprint is Backbeat Books. You should be able to take that name to any bookstore or online, find it online, and they can get it in for you.
Wonderful.
And it'll be on our Gear of the Day page as well.
Thank you.
Stackingadventures.com/GOTD. Well, that's going to do it. Joe and Craig, thank you so much. What's your next project, by the way? What are you working on now?
Well, we don't really have a project in the works. We're consolidating a little bit here at home. We've got this amazing granddaughter that we spend a lot of time with, and awesome. And I have rejoined a local choir, and
nice.
You know, I'm going to play some more gigs with my students and so forth. So, you know, we're just sort of sitting on it for a while.
The book was just published. It just came out the middle of October. So, you know, we have some promotion to do, interviews like this.
But as soon as we have another project, you'll be the first to know.
Yeah,
that's
deal.
The ink's
fantastic. Sold. Deal. Well, and I say this lovingly, but I got to think that your granddaughter is a victim of all this music. It's just there's no way she's getting out of the room without Grandpa going, "Oh, wait a minute, you got to hear this. You got to hear this." But wait, just one more. Yeah. I do that to my family, and I'm not even a musician. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you so much for having us. What fun this was.
Nice meeting you.
Super. Thanks for everybody hanging out with us on YouTube. She's Crystal.
And I'm Joe. He's Joe.
And let's keep on adventuring. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.